On the surface, the relationship between India and Bangladesh seems perfectly fine, maybe even friendly. But if you look just beneath that calm surface, you find a deep, persistent strategic anxiety. So the real question isn't whether they're allies. The question is, why is India so worried about Bangladesh? These two countries share so much: deep trade links, a common history, powerful cultural ties. Officially, they're close partners. But all of this public friendship, it kind of masks a growing concern in New Delhi. And the root of this anxiety isn't about hostility. It's about something much more fundamental and way more complex. Okay, so the first piece of this puzzle is geography. It's the one thing you can't change, and it dictates almost everything in India's strategic thinking. And in this case, sheer proximity creates an incredible amount of pressure. To really get the scale of this, just look at this number: 4,096 kilometers. That is the length of the border India shares with Bangladesh. It is, by far, India's longest international border with any country in the world. Just imagine trying to manage and secure a frontier that massive. Now, this border isn't just a line on a map. It's a huge strategic vulnerability. It literally wraps around India's 7 northeastern states on 3 sides. This creates what military planners call a choke point. What that means is, if the relationship were to sour, or if Bangladesh itself became unstable, India's connection to that entire vital region could be threatened. And this is what transforms the whole dynamic. For India, Bangladesh is not simply a neighbor. It's the essential land bridge, the strategic gateway to its own territory. So the stability and the foreign policy alignment of Bangladesh are completely inseparable from India's own internal security. This unchangeable geography gives rise to some very dynamic threats. The sheer length and the nature of this border create a constant flow of security problems that move right across it. The concerns coming from this porous border are really multi-layered. We're talking about large-scale illegal migration, which has caused major demographic shifts in Indian states like Assam and West Bengal. Naturally, this fuels social and political tension. And then, woven through all of this, is the constant threat of extremist networks using that porous border for movement and recruitment. So, here's the crucial point. These are not separate issues. India's biggest fear is that all these elements combine, that radical networks could use migration flows as a cover, set up safe havens inside Bangladeshi territory, and then actively work to destabilize India's already sensitive border regions. But this is no longer just a bilateral issue between two countries. A third, very big player has entered the game, adding a whole new layer of geopolitical complexity. India is now trying to manage the rapidly expanding influence of its main strategic rival, China, right in its own backyard. And the equation here is pretty stark. On one side, you have China's very concrete actions: billions in infrastructure investment, developing critical ports, and becoming a major supplier of military hardware to Bangladesh. And on the other side, you have India's fears, which are just as direct: strategic encirclement, a new pressure point on its eastern flank, and frankly, the loss of its influence in its own neighborhood. Beyond geography and geopolitics, India watches the internal political situation in Dhaka with an intense focus. Why? Because in this region, domestic politics in one country can very quickly become a national security risk for its neighbor. India really fears a specific chain reaction, a kind of domino effect. It would start with political chaos in Dhaka. That chaos could create an opening for anti-India political forces to rise. And that instability then creates a vacuum, which hostile foreign powers like China could easily exploit to gain influence at India's expense. For New Delhi, predictability is everything. In geopolitics, water is power. And this is especially true here. India and Bangladesh share 54 transboundary rivers. That turns a life-giving resource into a potential weapon. Disputes over who gets how much water can easily ignite nationalist anger and really damage diplomatic ties. And the competition doesn't just stop at the coastline. It extends right out into the sea. So now we have to turn to the maritime dimension, which is centered on the strategically vital Bay of Bengal. For India, the Bay of Bengal isn't just a body of water, it's a core strategic arena. It's home to the country's most critical trade routes. It's essential for national energy security, and it's the absolute key to maintaining naval dominance in the region. And Bangladesh's long coastline puts it in a pivotal position, right in the middle of it all. So here's the bottom line. Any foreign military presence, especially a naval presence from a rival like China, That is enabled by having access to Bangladeshi ports. Well, that wouldn't just be a concern. It would be a direct and unacceptable challenge to India's core maritime and national security interests. So when we bring all these different threads together, we start to see the central paradox of this relationship. India's deep concern is not a sign of hostility. It's the direct result of just how overwhelmingly important Bangladesh is. Let me put it as simply as I can. India is not worried because it sees Bangladesh as an adversary. Not at all. It's worried because Bangladesh is so critical to its own security that any instability in Dhaka has immediate and severe consequences back in New Delhi. You can really distill this entire relationship down into a few core equations. First, a stable and prosperous Bangladesh directly translates into a more secure eastern flank for India. Second, a Bangladesh that is aligned with, or at least neutral towards, India's strategic interests, well, that provides New Delhi with crucial strategic depth in its competition with China. And finally, the unchangeable reality that underpins everything else. Bangladesh's geography is India's greatest geographic vulnerability. In this complex world, a neighbor is never just a neighbor. They're either a strategic asset or a strategic liability. And that is the untold truth.